The iPad Air is pretty boring, or that's what I thought going into this because it's basically an M2 iPad Pro with less features and a cheaper form factor. And I have to say, I'm surprised how much I actually like the new 13-inch iPad Air. But I'm also surprised with what actually bothered me, and spoiler alert, it is not the display. When I first unboxed the iPad Air, I thought I knew exactly what I was getting. As an owner of the M2 iPad Pro, I was expecting Apple to just reuse the same 12.9-inch body for the new iPad Air, and I mean, that is exactly what they did on the smaller 11-inch version. As soon as I opened the Air from its beautiful box, something felt amiss though. After just handling the insanely thin and light 13-inch iPad Pro and comparing it against my old M2 iPad Pro, I picked up the Air and was shocked at how it felt lighter than my Pro. I compared it against my M2 iPad Pro and it looked thinner, it felt lighter, and I thought I was going crazy. So I checked Apple's specification page to get the exact dimensions, and it turns out your friend Greg, he wasn't crazy, he was just perceptive. Because it turns out the iPad Air was indeed a hair thinner than the M2 iPad Pro and actually sports a 10% weight reduction over the M2 iPad Pro design. Now, I know these figures don't sound like they would make that much of a difference, but trust me, when you're dealing with a device that you hold for a prolonged period of time, every bit of weight reduction helps. And to me, this feels a lot more manageable than the previous version of that iPad Pro. The color choices, however, leave a lot to be desired. I asked on my Twitter, yes, I use Twitter if you want to follow me, what color the iPad was, and most of the responses were gray. Well, this is what Apple calls the blue model, and well, I'll let you be the judge of how it looks. Now, even if you have done the tiniest bit of research on Apple's new iPad lineup, you know the iPad Air is the cheaper alternative to the iPad Pro. And you know the new iPad Pro comes with a brand new, hyped up tandem OLED display. And this iPad Air just gets a standard, basic LCD display, not even the older mini LED display that was just used in the last generation Pro. And as someone that has used that gorgeous new display on the iPad Pro, I was expecting this standard 60 Hz non-ProMotion LCD display to be absolutely disgusting. And I was disgusted with myself to even dare touch such plebeian technology, and disgusted with the world in general for constantly making the loudest and angriest voices the most that's another tangent. Well, in a shocking turn of events, the iPad Air's display didn't bother me. In fact, I thought it looked kind of good. Now, yes, the new OLED displays or even the old mini LED display are better displays than the Airs. And you can absolutely notice the difference, especially if you put them side by side. But it just wasn't as drastic as I was expecting, especially when you're not watching videos where you can appreciate the higher contrast ratio and the deeper black levels, or when you're not using the iPad near a bright light source where you can appreciate the OLED display's extra brightness. So in a normal lit room, when you put them side by side and you're just on the home screen, there is a slight difference. Like there's a little more pop on the OLED, a punch more brightness, but it's just not the night and day difference I was expecting. The iPad Pro's display even runs a little warm compared to the LCD display on the Air, and some people can't stand that, so if you like a cooler display tone, you might actually, in a way, prefer the Airs, and I know that sounds strange considering the display technology is better on the Pro, but there are some people that are really nitpicky with this. The display also strangely gets up to 600 nits of brightness when the 11-inch only gets up to 500 nits, so it's actually technically a better display over the smaller iPad Air. Even the lower 60 Hz refresh rate is something I was expecting to really notice, especially after I just recently used the regular iPad and the iPad mini. I did notice that lower 60 Hz refresh rate a lot when using those devices, but for some reason, I'm not noticing it as much here. Maybe it's the fact that the M2 is just so snappy in this machine that animations and scrolling look extra smooth, even with the lower refresh rate, like it still appears fluid. Now again, yeah, you compare it side by side with the 120 Hz iPad Pro, you'll see the difference for sure, but in a vacuum, the display still holds up surprisingly well for an LCD display. And it just isn't what bothered me about the Air, and I think that's what most people kind of complain about with the iPad Air is the display. What did bother me was the other niceties I took for granted on the iPad Pro. One of those areas where I really noticed a downgraded experience was the speakers. When I first started listening to something, I was expecting the fullness of the 4-speaker system on those big iPad Pros. Unfortunately, the Air only has a 2-speaker system, and you can really hear the difference. Now, in terms of volumes, they both get pretty loud, but the iPad Pro's 4-speaker system just has extra depth and fullness to them, where the Air's in comparison sounds almost muffled, almost kind of hollow coming out of the 2-speaker system. I appreciate the camera shifting to the landscape orientation. I think it is better for video calls when you're using it with a keyboard. But something that bothered me with the Air is Face ID. It's not on here, so you have to use Touch ID. Now, Touch ID works fine, but it's a big iPad, so there's times where you're holding the iPad and you kind of have to slide all the way up to reach that Touch ID sensor, and it feels extra inconvenient on the bigger 12.9-inch, or I guess Apple's calling it the 13-inch, even though it has a 12.9-inch display, the 13-inch iPad Air. So depending on your hand placement, you may have to reach up and tap that fingerprint sensor, or other times, if you're holding it in landscape, it's okay. Other annoyances for me have to do with the weird inconsistency with the accessories for this product. Apple just came out with a new Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro, which features a lot of nice design improvements like a metal bottom, a glass haptic trackpad, and a function key row on the top. But sadly, this new iPad Air isn't compatible with that keyboard, and it still sticks with the old Magic Keyboard design. Now, if you already own an old Magic Keyboard like I do, that's fine because you can actually save money and reutilize this keyboard, which is good, right? You don't have to upgrade to a new setup. But if you are buying these products fresh, which I think most people probably are, it's kind of a sour point to me that you can't just get the better keyboard. It's also just strange to me that there's 3 iPads in the lineup and they all have their own separate keyboard design. Now, I really hope we can eventually get to a point where we reduce this bloated accessory lineup and just have a keyboard design in both sizes that works for every iPad, but sadly, we're not there yet. That brings me to the next accessory, the Apple Pencil. Well, I was actually surprised when I gathered my old Magic Keyboard and my Apple Pencil too, because I was expecting both to pair to the iPad Air, right? The iPad Air must use the same old accessories. However, my Apple Pencil 2 didn't stick or connect right to my iPad Air. And I was scratching my head and kind of thinking, why isn't this working? Oh, wait a minute. Duh. The old Apple Pencil doesn't work with the iPad Air. You need the Apple Pencil Pro. So you need the old keyboard, but you need the new Apple Pencil Pro. And that attaches to the Air. Now, this is either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how positive your outlook on life is. The good is that you get the new Air with the new features of the Apple Pencil Pro, which is compelling, right? This is an improved experience over the Apple Pencil 2. It has a haptic motor in it where you can actually click the button to bring up like a list of quick tools when you're drawing or writing. It's really handy to use and it feels like a physical button press even though it's just haptics. This feature is something that is going to be really helpful for anyone using their iPad for professional drawing, illustration, or in a design setting. You also get access to the Apple Pencil hover feature and the new barrel roll feature, which lets you reorientate your brush from like a wide stroke to kind of like a more narrow one. And getting access to these new features, even on just a regular iPad Air, that's a big win. However, you could approach it from the other angle, right? If you already own this Apple Pencil 2, well, once again, you're going to have to spend another $130 just to get support for the latest accessory. It's, in a strange way, the exact opposite problem of the Magic Keyboard problem, and just one of the strange inconsistencies with this product. And let me be frank here, everything else about the Air is not that interesting. It gets the M2 chip, which I already have used extensively on the last iPad Pro. And yeah, it's a powerful chip. You can play games, use heavy-duty applications like Final Cut Pro, Logic, use Apple's Stage Manager feature, and you can even connect this iPad to a bigger external monitor. Apps open quickly, the performance is snappy, and with an M2 chip, this iPad is incredibly capable and versatile. It is a powerhouse, right? But again, most of us are already well aware with the M2 chip's performance. But what's not that boring about this is that Apple is delivering an incredible value here, because this product, honestly, isn't supposed to excite you. This is the product that needs to kind of compete for a value standpoint. And Apple delivers here. For $799, you can now get the bigger iPad screen size. That's a win. You also get 128 gigabytes of base storage, which is finally a good starting configuration for the iPad Air for this price point, and it should fit many basic users well. You also get a thinner and lighter design than the previous Pro. You get a landscape camera. You get support for the Apple Pencil Pro. And with the bigger 13-inch display, this iPad Air offers more room for a bigger canvas or more room to multitask on, making it an ideal replacement for a laptop compared to the smaller size of the 11-inch Air. Couple that together with the M2 chip's performance, and from a performance to price ratio, this thing is an outstanding value. But only if you're just buying the iPad. Because if you don't have a keyboard already, or you need to shell out for that new Apple Pencil Pro, well, then that does start to diminish the value proposition of this product, because then it quickly gets into MacBook Air pricing territory. Still, this is an iPad video, and if you're watching this, you're probably interested in iPads, not MacBooks. So yeah, when we're dealing with iPads, it's still a good value. And if you're looking at the 11-inch instead of this 13-inch model, well, both models are fantastic options, right? That want a fast, capable iPad. Well, that one's even cheaper at $599. So if you can stand the smaller screen, you stand to get an even better value. And both are especially fantastic options for people that want a fast, capable iPad that can do all the iPad software stuff without all the hardware bells and whistles of the very expensive iPad Pro. I didn't think I'd walk away so happy with the Air, but it's hard to deny the value that Apple is delivering here. But let me know down below, what are your thoughts on the iPad Air? Do you think this is the iPad to get, or should you shell out more money for a Pro? As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a like. If you want to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one.